Welcome to InkThinks. Pokemon is one of my favorite franchises ever. Heck, it's a lot of people's favorite franchise ever. It's rooted in so many people's childhood, which was done by design. The very way that Pokemon was formatted and marketed across 3 different mediums at once was done exactly to bring people in, and this formula has largely stayed the same over the years, which is really nice for new people to be able to experience what older people have in the past, but it's not so nice for established fans who start to see the same thing over and over. So as Pokemon starts to move to other platforms like smartphones with Pokemon Go or consoles like the Switch, it's becoming more and more apparent that they're going to need to change something up quickly if they want to stay relevant and keep putting out good games. Now, when I talk about changing things up, here's what I'm not talking about. I'm not talking about graphics, animation, or necessarily even the structure of the game where you fight a bunch of gyms and then the Elite Four. These are all things that are super nice to have, but you can have a great game without focusing on any of these in particular. So what are some things that Pokemon does need to fix in their modern games? Well, first off, we have the Pokedex. The Pokedex is an awesome idea. It's really cool to be able to see all the Pokemon that you've found over the years start to pile up in your decks. But what are they going to do with it? At this rate, we're going to have well over 1,000 Pokemon soon, so do they keep adding to the Pokedex forever, or do they totally stop and start over at some point? It's really difficult to say because the cast of Pokemon is getting so huge that it's hard to even grasp it, but all of these Pokemon have become so rooted in the franchise and what brings people to it over the years that totally getting rid of them would take out a lot of what brings people to the franchise. They could alter existing ones like they've done with Alolan Pokemon, but when it comes down to it, that's not all too different than just adding more Pokemon. With how it's set up now, whether they keep adding Pokemon or reboot, they're in a really hard place right now. Fans always have a strong reaction to cutting Pokemon from the games, and this is only going to be augmented by cutting all of them. But at the same time, we've seen Game Freak stretch themselves really thin by trying to balance a ton of different Pokemon, and certain parts of the game feel empty because of it. Which brings us to another point that we need to talk about: Game Freak. Now, people often criticize Game Freak for their development choices, and while it's true that they've made some questionable, if not downright nonsensical decisions in the past, I do think that they're often unfairly represented on both sides of the argument. For starters, they don't have nearly enough people working on their games for the size of their company. In 2019, there were 143 employees total at Game Freak. And when you contrast this with the size of teams of other big games, for example, Red Dead Redemption 2, which had 1,600 people, it starts to show why certain parts of Pokemon games have felt empty. Game Freak has the largest franchise in the world in its hands, and I really think that they would benefit from having some extra help. But at the same time though, I can somewhat understand their development choices. For example, if they can't add more people to the game's team for whatever reason, and they're stuck trying to make all of these games with that small team, I understand why they've cut corners here and there. But even with a large team at this point, there's just so much content with Pokemon that it's gotta feel like information overload to the team. And with so many different aspects of the game, it's gotta make it really difficult to get a grasp on, let alone measure or balance. And this is part of the cause for a lot of depth put into the game in some places while being totally ignored in others. For example, in Pokemon Sword and Shield, there was a fully developed curry system, but the world itself started to feel a little empty after a few hours. They were so close to something great here, and their focus on what they put time into the game just felt off. And let's talk about that world for a bit. Pokemon is as old as I am, about 23 years, and it has so much lore in its history and world, but almost none of that comes through in the games. Nearly every game starts around the same. You start in some small town, traveling from place to place while battling some criminal organization and beating gym leaders to eventually become the champion. But there's so many other aspects of Pokemon that they can dive into while doing this at the same time. For example, just listing some things that came to my mind in a few minutes, they have Pokemon Rangers, Pokemon Mystery Dungeons, Law Enforcement, Underground Fighting Arenas, Battle Stadiums, Coliseums, Pokemon Contests, Safaris, a Medicine Field, Trading Cards, Photography, a Researcher or Archaeologist looking into old or extinct Pokemon, a Crypto-Pokeologist looking into Pokemon that supposedly don't exist, or maybe adding minigames to Pokemon like they had in Stadium. There's so much diversity that they could choose to add here, and they could focus on this in addition to what they already have established. With the size of the franchise and the huge impact of the series, it's really just a shame that we can't fully experience the world of Pokemon. It would be so nice to not only become the champion of the league, but to be able to pursue other paths in life, creating a truly unique journey for our trainer. I'm picturing something kind of like Skyrim, where you have one quest that you're going down the whole time, but there's also guilds or side quests or other adventures that you can partake in along the way. I just want them to let us fully explore the world of Pokemon. And speaking of this world, they should add to it as well. Pokemon Sword and Shield was so close to having a full and immersive world, but in the end, I think it only had the skeleton of it. It would do so much if they just added little secrets or collectibles all over the world. Let us discover Pokemon, not just see them walking around. For example, maybe we can find a rare Pokemon that wasn't even advertised, hiding in a remote location that other people might not find. Maybe you find a rare water-typed chicken nugget Pokemon hiding behind a waterfall. And then you go to school the next day and tell your friends all about it, they don't believe you, and it starts this whole sort of rumor culture with the game that was so valuable when it was starting. In addition to adding to this world, it would be so cool to see Pokemon more integrated into everyday lives. Whether you have your own Pokemon out helping you do stuff, maybe kind of like Pikmin, or you see other people actively working with their Pokemon in their day-to-day life in meaningful ways, just that little attention to detail would add a lot. And speaking of interacting with your Pokemon, that's something that they could really go head first into. My friend Birdkeeper Toby put out a video talking about what it would be like to have a Chow Garden-like system in Pokemon. The Chow Garden comes from Sonic Adventure. It's a totally unrelated part of the game compared to the main story, but it creates such a sense of bonding and immersion, being able to take care of these little creatures, put them into mini games, and raise them. And that is something that Pokemon is perfectly set up to do, but they just haven't totally executed on it. A lot of their attempts start feeling more like a Fire Emblem dating simulator than it does actually taking care of Pokemon. Simple changes in the online experience could also really help augment this immersion. For example, rather than just battling with friends online or trading, having some sort of online MMO aspect where you can see friends in real time around the town, or even just leave notes around like Dark Souls would be really great, and it would help add to that sense of living in an actual world of Pokemon. Now, speaking of Dark Souls for 1 second, let's talk about the difficulty. Not every game needs to be super difficult. I don't think that at all. Some of my favorite games are casual and easy experiences like Animal Crossing. But adding or tweaking the option for difficulty would at the very least be a welcome addition. Maybe they could alter the default difficulty in little ways by not holding our hands through the tutorial, but just dropping us into a forest and letting us figure it out. That's something that Breath of the Wild did really well. But adding other difficulty elements, such as making your Pokemon weaker or other Pokemon stronger in a menu select, would be a really great option, and there's so many cool challenges that you can do in Pokemon. For example, the Nuzlocke challenge is incredibly popular in the Pokemon scene, which essentially means that you can only catch limited Pokemon, and if that Pokemon faints, then you have to get rid of them. But they could also add a bunch of other unique challenges that would make the game a lot more interesting. For example, maybe you can enable not having items, or not being able to heal in Pokemon centers, things like that. But really, it sounds like I'm saying the same thing here over and over. When it comes down to it, Pokemon needs to mix up its formula. Maybe that's doubling down on their Pokemon Legends series that they announced and really getting it right. Or maybe they changed their turn-based RPG format, which is something that's slowly dying out, to something more modern like an action RPG, tactical RPG, or especially some sort of sandbox RPG like Red Dead Redemption 2 that I mentioned earlier. They could also really dive into the story and make it great. It doesn't need to be dark or anything, that's not Pokemon, but just executing on what they do have well would make all the difference. Despite all of its flaws though, Pokemon is still a great game and a super promising and meaningful franchise to a lot of people. Nothing and no one has ever been able to totally duplicate its impact on the world. I know that Pokemon can improve and the games have so much potential to grow. So those are my thoughts on what I would change in Pokemon and what I would like to see happen. Let me know what changes you would make in the comments below. If you want to hear about the YouTube journey of a popular Pokemon YouTuber, stick around and that'll be coming out this weekend. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, keep thinking.